G'day and welcome to Talking Aussie Farming, where we dive deep into Australian agriculture. I'm your host, Jono Weinstock from FarmCap, where we provide private credit for Australian agriculture. And today, very exciting. Who doesn't like fresh food? Turning up to the farmers market on a Sunday morning at venues all across Australia. I'm very excited to welcome a special guest, Jane Adams from Sydney, who's the pioneer of the Australian Farmers Market Association. Jane, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Jono. I'm happy to be here. I'm always happy to talk farmers markets.
Excellent. Fresh food, produce, feeding the nation. It's a huge role, but let's first hear about your background and how does someone get into this sector and literally pioneer an Australian industry that has a huge impact not only on feeding people, but the whole range of benefits and connections across Australia.
Well, I am a city girl, but I had a couple of farming uncles. One was a dairy farmer down in Gippsland. One was into grain and cattle and sheep, sort of western New South Wales, around Orange. I spent a lot of school holidays. I learned how to milk a cow. I also learnt a few of those sort of farmyard things when I was a kid, and I really enjoyed it. I'm also, by background and training, a journalist, and I found myself in my mid career writing about food, doing restaurant reviews. Food was very prominent in my life. And then all of a sudden along came I think it must have been an email, anyway, alerting me to the fact there was in the UK, not a Churchill Fellowship, but there was a fellowship available called the Geoffrey Robertson Award, which was angled at people working in food, wine, and hospitality, which by then I was actively. And I applied for the fellowship with the wish to go to the US to research farmers markets.
Right.
That was at the end of the 90s. I went to the US to do that research in 1998, and then in 1999 ran the first workshop for a community which was actually in Orange in New South Wales. So the beginnings of Australia's farmers market movement goes back to the late 90s.
Right. And so the very first one, where did that start? Was that in Orange, was it?
Well, it wasn't actually. They were underway, but they weren't the actual first to start. I ran
Okay.
quite a lot of workshops in different communities in Australia and incidentally in New Zealand later. But the first one was in Victoria. The Orange one started a little bit later.
Okay.
And there are now approximately 200 farmers markets in all states
Incredible.
in,
So from
in
0 to
Australia.
200 in 25 years or so, commenced and built a whole industry. What were the key findings from the UK and the US? Do they, how do we do it compared to them? And I guess what were the key learnings back then?
Right. Well, back then, the key players, I guess, and I tend to call it a sector rather than an industry, but the key players, and the reason I went to America, because that's where the action was. And it was in America, farmers markets started as a reaction, really, in California to factory farming. That they were the kind of, the gurglings that started, and they started or even earlier in the 80s. Berkeley, California was, one of the hubs. The UK had picked up on it a little bit. And when I was doing the research in America, I heard of a woman, just anecdotally, who was there from the UK also looking. So, farmers markets as a concept, which is essentially, and I think we probably should identify that now so we know what we're talking about. A farmer's market is a regular, in terms of timing, food centric market that happens within a particular community where the stall holders are either the farmers and the food producers or the artisan value adders of the food, cheese or butter, for
Okay.
example, and that they're selling it direct to shoppers.
Hmm.
That is the fundamental difference of what a farmer's market actually is, as opposed to what I would describe as a community market, where you might get some food sold and you might get it sold by people who've grown it, but where there are a whole host of other goods, whether it's clothing or cosmetics, all sorts of other things, that candles that you might find, craft in a market. A farmer's market is specifically a food focused market, and shopping there is a food focused destination.
Gotcha. Understand. So you know what you're getting when you turn up to an accredited farmers market in Australia. You're buying direct, from the producer, from Paddock, hopefully, um, and helping, support the local farmers as well with fresh produce. And I've got to say, it just, how much better does it taste? You're a foodie, and I'm guessing a pretty good cook, and so access to.
I love cooking. Yeah.
Well, later in the episode, I'd love to know what your favourite dish is. Maybe a few tips. I'm not the best, um, but fresh produce, nothing beats it. We travel around the country visiting farms and picking a piece of fruit off the tree, and even taking my family down to the Mornington Peninsula to pick some strawberries. And you really wonder how we've survived so long buying produce from the majors in the meantime. So I guess it's filling a huge gap. Now, I guess America versus Australian farmers markets. Did you see huge uptake? I guess over there, and were there any
Mm.
particular things that worked really well that you were able to translate into Australia?
Well, I did develop a model that was derivative of what I discovered in America, but it isn't exactly the same as what I found. And one of the main differences, in fact, and I had to be upfront about this right from the get go when I developed the workshops. One of the things that I saw repeatedly was that after the market, stallholders in America would sit on their stalls or on, the runner of their truck or whatever, and they'd actually count the cash. And you got to remember, this is in the 80s,
Yeah.
right? Very much cash. And they'd count their money, and I was perplexed. They were sitting there in the open counting
Right.
green dollar bills, and I thought, oh, you wouldn't see that in Australia. And they were paying effectively a cash tithe percentage of their take to the market
Right.
as their store fee. So they did their store fee on a percentage of sales,
Hmm.
and they often seemingly did it or took it as cash. And I knew that when I ran those workshops here in Australia, if I said to people, yeah, right, you're going to have to pay 10% or whatever it is of your morning take,
Yeah.
that was not going to go down well here in Australia.
Okay.
That was one big difference. Now, I haven't seen what happens now in the American scenario, but I'm quite sure they buy their food on their phones, use Square, Tap and Go, whatever. It's probably a very different scenario to what it was, 20 odd years ago. But that was one main difference. Primarily, though, the model that I developed for what I thought was going to work here in Australia very closely mirrored what I experienced in America. And on that trip, I met with market managers of successful markets, managers of failed markets, stallholders. The USDA even had in Washington a little farmers market division down a very long corridor. I met with health, nutrition people. I met with town planners. I mean, all sorts of people that, in fact, are involved and need to be involved when communities establish farmers markets. And from those meetings, and I developed a model. I rolled it out when communities put their hands up and said, "Oh, we want one of those, please." I did workshops in communities all over Australia, and many of those markets, and I can think of several that started 20 odd years ago and adopted the model, and Wollonga in South Australia, Margaret River in WA, Albany in WA. There's some of the markets that have been trading the longest along the lines of what I thought would work here in Australia. And I guess that's been very gratifying to see, the amazing kind of results that have come from this over time and the benefits for communities. It's just fantastic.
It is fantastic. I can't see any downside. So, if you're presenting to a local community, I mean, are there any reasons why anyone would object?
Oh, yes. I can tell you a good story.
If
There was one community where the main street stall holders, I won't name the community, but the main street stall holders were absolutely up in
Right,
arms
competition.
because the farmers market was positioned to trade sensibly because it had all the facilities
Mhm.
at the local showground. And the Main Street stall holders, oh, they were outraged. They called a public meeting,
Right.
they called the council, but, they weren't happy. But in point of fact, what happened was so many people turned up. Well, actually, on the launch of that market, the first day, the mayor got stuck in the traffic jam on the way to the showground, was late. But the market was such a boomer that there were so many people around town, the stall holders the shopkeepers were absolutely overjoyed.
Oh,
They
that's
hadn't
great.
had such a busy Saturday in years.
So it drove traffic to the main
Mm.
street and everyone
Yeah,
benefited. Yeah, okay. I
yeah,
could see that,
everybody
yeah.
benefited.
So how did it
And there's
expand?
some
Sorry, go on.
Oh, and I was just going to
Yeah.
say, there's some very good research there's a market down in Moruya in South Coast, New South Wales. They've done some research over the years to track their progress, in fact, with Canberra Uni, and they've posted some really powerful economic development figures, which is to say the additional impact on the local economy, not just the market day trading into the producers' pockets, but that spin off effect into the community. They have actually measured some of those impacts through, doing research, and the economic impact in their community is millions of dollars
That's great. Well,
and
money
has grown over time.
well, it's great. Money goes back into local, producers, right, which
Yeah.
inevitably goes back into the community. That's
Yeah.
great. I'm guessing the uptake from the farmers, it's a big day for them. They drive into town, they set up their stall, selling direct, making a good margin. What's their feedback and experience been like, and are they still keen to keep turning up?
Oh, yeah. One story I remember, a portly asparagus grower. He turned up with purple asparagus, and he wasn't. I don't think he thought he was going to sell so much because it was a bit different. But he sold out of his purple asparagus, and he had a very big grin on his face after that market morning. I mean, most of the producers that sell in farmers markets typically are smaller family farms,
Mhm.
but not entirely. Sometimes they're bigger producers, and I've had encounters with, I remember in WA, a brassica grower. He wanted his son to sort of branch out and get more involved in the family farm. And he gave the son the task of sorting himself out to take cauliflowers and broccoli and to the local market. And they were very big growers, and they also they supplied supermarkets. But so there are different reasons sometimes why um, food producers get involved, and it's not only fruit and vegetables, obviously meat, chicken, seafood, and then the value added goods come into it as well: pasta, cheese, bread, jams, honey. I mean, the normal kind of food that you would expect in that sort of setting. And farmers markets really came into their own during COVID because if you remember, going into a supermarket was kind of scary.
Hmm,
People were very happy to shop in the fresh air, and farmers markets traded all through COVID.
great.
And it was a good thing for the producers because their supply chains were interrupted during that period. But it meant that if they had a regional farmers market, they could take their produce to market, and everybody was happy to get fresh food while we lived through that. rather unusual period of our lives. I think shopping in a farmer's market then was a very joyous thing to do.
That's right. Our numbers would have spiked, um,
Yeah.
yeah, dramatically during that time.
Yeah.
And I guess, over time, have you seen any shift in the type of produce that seems to be on offer or that's of more interest than others?
Um, well, yes and no. I mean, I think fresh food, our veggies and our fruit and whatever, we haven't the the one vegetable actually that was launched, I think, in farmers markets is a kale, Cavolo Nero. Cavolo Nero is just a spear-shaped sort of cabbage-style dark green leaf, and that's the Italian name for it. I don't think anybody had cooked that in Australia till it turned up in farmers markets, and
Right.
I know my farming uncle thought, you feed that stuff to the animals, you don't eat it. But Cavolo Nero has, people discovered it, like the purple asparagus. You can actually, people who want to grow alternative varieties or heirloom varieties of tomatoes, for example, a great place to introduce unusual varieties is actually at a farmer's market because your shopper is standing in front of you and you talk to them face to face
That's right.
about what it is and how to cook it. And
That's right.
it's a sensible way to go about selling food.
You've probably seen some quirky fruit and vegetables come and go.
Um, well, the Cavolo Nero doesn't seem to be quite as common as it was for a
Mm,
while. Certainly, heirloom tomatoes came into farmers' markets and are still very much present, in the season. And that's, of course, Jono, that's the other thing about it. You're shopping seasonally for food,
that's right.
which is also important. It's healthy. Um, it gives everybody a different perspective. I know you can get strawberries all year round if you want to, but it seems to me that you should be eating them in season.
That's right. And what about attendances? Have you seen them steady or grow or decline over time?
Oh, that depends a bit on individual circumstances. The one, I guess we might get to talk about challenges, but
Mm,
I think it's worth mentioning now. Climate is probably the biggest challenge in many respects. There are others, and up in the northeast of New South Wales, there's virtually a farmer's market every day of the week
wow.
except Monday. Yeah. They're very well served up there. But you've got a situation where we've had weather, events, I think is the euphemism,
Mhm.
that's caused challenges in certain places at certain times. But the number of markets trading has remained, well, in the beginning, obviously, there was a big rise.
Yeah.
Then it started to even out. There are not many what I would call market failures. The markets that establish
Hmm.
along the Farmers Markets Association sort of suggested best practice lines, they are very long lived and sustainable, and many of them are over 20 years old. And they're very embedded in their communities. They're extremely popular. One of the other things that is a bit of a challenge, other than weather, in other words, there's some days you can't run the market,
Mm,
obviously, um, is the age of Australia's farmers.
that's
I
right.
mean, our farming, I think it used to be, you might know better than I, it used to be, I think the average age was 63 years or something like that was the
Yeah,
average age.
we'd call that a young farmer if we met one. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's creeping up. That's right. And there is generational challenges. To be able to send
Yeah.
kids and go and sell some produce at the market and learn a few skills. It's probably not easy to find people to help. So no, there is a huge challenge ahead.
Well, there are some stallholders, especially in the value added space. There are some stallholders who are doing launching food businesses as a side hustle to what they might do professionally. I can think of several people in Tasmania. There's a very good market in Launceston, for
Mhm.
example. And, if you've got a hobby block and you can grow a small crop of something, but you happen to be a nurse at the local hospital, that all is possible too in the context of farmers markets.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, from my point of view, I find very few downsides. I think that if the markets are set up as authentic, legitimate farmers markets, they are sustainable, they can be long lived, they can contribute massively
Mm.
to their local community. Um, it's win-win.
That's right.
Um, mm.
And it's, just to clarify, it's non-profit, is that right? So the fees from that.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, now there's variation here.
Yeah.
Some some markets run as incorporated associations, which is to say a not-profit structure, essentially. And that's certainly the structure that the Farmers Markets Association advocates. There are some that are run as private businesses,
Okay.
um, some of them quite successfully by committed people. There was one at a time, but that wasn't picked up as a popular structure, that was actually a company that was set up where the farmer stallholders were the shareholders in it.
Okay. So like a
But that
co-op?
was effectively, but that hasn't been widely adopted as a structure. Most farmers markets are trading under the incorporated association structure primarily.
Okay. So they're like accredited with you guys, which keeps the integrity of the farmers market, and then the stallholders pay a fee, I'm guessing, and that goes to that local market, and then I assume there's some kind of fee to the national body to help keep the thing moving. Does it employ any people?
Oh, well, markets employ market managers
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
and
As in like I guess the peak body that you run. Does that
oh
employ people?
no, we're all
Okay.
volunteers.
So honorary. So just to share with our audience, it's for the love of food and fresh food and community.
It has been certainly my positioning. I would know to be absolutely transparent about this. Occasionally, there have been fees paid in the early days, but that was by government to facilitate some of the community engagement. But the running of the Farmers Markets Association nationally, and there are state bodies nationally ongoing, the members of the association are, well, members. The active state based participants are voluntary,
Mhm.
and we don't have farmer members for the association. We have state, so it's a federated system. And the states liaise with then the market managers of the markets in their states and the managers with the stall holders. So it's a trickle down
Okay. Now, what about
effect.
what about consumer trends? The next generation shop online, delivery services, lazy, all sorts of changing of buying behavior, and price sensitivity, I guess. But at the same time, how do you compare quality of produce, but you've actually got to go and physically enjoy the experience? So I guess just understanding the demographic of the, I guess, attendee, and whether they're spending more or less based on these, million alternatives.
Well, happily, I can. There's very little what I would call empirical research in this space. And if somebody is watching this and they've got funds for research, would they please contact me? Because I would
Right.
love to be able to give you, real data,
Yeah.
which we don't have. But in essence, the general sort of my observations, and obviously I spend time visiting farmers markets quite frequently, and I was in the northeast of New South Wales at markets just in the last couple of weeks. The the demographics vary very much depending on the location of the market. So you have big urban farmers markets.
Hmm.
Carriage Works in Sydney is a big market. I mean, they get thousands of people through there on a morning,
Wow.
and it's a Saturday morning and it's weekly. And that's one of the things in terms of things that have changed. And 20 years ago, when markets started, they actually tended to start as monthly events. Well, now when they start, they're weekly.
Right.
Nobody even thinks that only do it once a month. It's weekly because we eat and we need to shop.
That's right.
The demographics vary depending on the location of the market. So you've got in a rural stroke regional location, you'll have quite a mixed population, age, etc., families. Marie would be a good case in point because but there are also quite a lot of retirees in that part along the coast. So you can't give any kind of definitive answer
Mm.
to who shops, but very often, and in the beginning with some of the research, the highest percentage was female between 30 and 55
Okay.
would be the standard. But that's if you've got a market on a Saturday in a community where you've got, very mixed demographic, families are there. I mean, why wouldn't you take your kids to go
That's right.
shopping at
Well,
Farmers Way?
yeah, well, the reason is, Woolies online, 3 clicks and it turns up in under an hour. That's the, and sadly,
Well,
that's the alternative. Um,
that's the alternative, and it's not very evocative. One of the things that I think happened during COVID was people discovered farmers markets that they'd never been before.
mm,
All of a sudden they went because, the alternative wasn't so attractive. And the other thing about farmers markets, it's, fantastic community connections,
mm,
and they run activities for children to, educate them about food. It's not just, I mean, it's so much more than, and nothing real, or not very many things come in packets. It's you take your shopping trolley and you can smell it and you can touch it. And if you're a child, you can eat it immediately,
that's right.
being pushed around, with strawberries in your lap. But I, the convenience thing, and I get home deliveries from a supermarket. I mean, I don't want to spend time in a shopping aisle in a supermarket,
No,
but I don't get vegetables delivered.
that
It's horses and courses.
that's true. So
Um,
it supplements
I don't want to.
what we're
I don't want
thinking.
to carry home heavy detergent containers or.
No.
Um, but I think, and one of the things that happened also, and I come back to COVID because COVID did cause change. Um, Several of the markets started home delivery services so that you could order. They had online ordering platforms. You could order online and you could then have your box delivered, or you could go to a central point at a particular time band to pick up your box. So markets innovated. They started thinking outside of market day. And people don't go to the farmers market necessarily every week. It depends, obviously, what you've got on.
Mm.
But for many people, it's become a habit, and that's a great thing.
It is a great thing. It's quite remarkable. Look, with the availability of convenience and online shopping, but to see people still turning out in their numbers weekly, fortnightly, monthly, all around Australia and
Mm.
growing, I think just shows you, the importance of fresh fruit. It's probably, rare in these days to show that trend where it's still popular despite all the alternatives. So I think that's quite remarkable. And yeah, who doesn't like turning out and enjoying some music and a coffee and some fresh food? Now, what about the majors? Have they poked their noses up or given you any grief, I guess, relative to the size of the produce that's being sold elsewhere? Have you got a few phone calls or concerns or
No, I've been on. I've had some amusing sort of, and more accidental encounters. Really, they weren't deliberate ones. Um, on a couple of occasions, the Farmers Markets Association has presented to parliamentary committees of inquiry into food security and things like that, and I, which is important, significant, and it's good that this sector in the food chain is included. Um, but I came on after the representative from personal to the committee. I was in Canberra. Came on after one of the duopoly gave their pitch to the parliamentary committee. So we met in the corridor. That was, polite and slightly ironic, I thought. One of the main kind of signs to me that the duopoly have noticed, and it's not recent, this goes back in time, there had been changes to the store fit outs at one point. So the way the fresh produce was displayed, and of course it's always where you go, where you enter the supermarket, they suddenly put up signs on the food, on the fruit and the veggies, on blackboards, chalk signs on blackboards, and they put fascia panels on the display so that it looked a bit sort of timber and rustic.
right?
That there was a mimicry kind of effort
Right.
happening in
Okay.
store.
Right. Copy an
Um,
in-store farmers market. Pretend.
mm,
Right. Okay.
yeah,
Well, that's
kind
very
of make. So I took that as flattery,
yes.
and there were rather disconcerting cutouts, giant life-size cutouts of farmers who were standing they'd been sort of ramjetted onto the end of a row,
Right.
and they'd be standing there looking at you as you were, selecting your produce. Look, that's really as much as has sort of happened. I think, well, partly because there are no, as I said, there hasn't been a lot of research done. Um, there's no quantifier of the scale of farmers markets
Right.
in many respects.
Yeah. Well, in terms of
So
market share, do you have any idea of
that
total spend per month or per year at farmers markets across Australia? What's the size of the sector?
no,
No?
no, we
Data
don't.
is not.
No, we don't.
Okay. Right.
But typically, a household spend on a market morning from some of the research has come out to be a bit. Well, it used to be sort of about $60, but obviously with inflation, that's gone up.
Okay.
There are figures from, I mean, if anybody's watching this and they want to know more, there is some research around the Maruya Farmers Market that I would be able to share in terms of actual spend at farmers markets, and their research, they've done their economic impact study twice now. So they've been able to measure increases over time. There was a 5-year gap between the two surveys that they did. But the increase in part would be inflation.
That's true. And I guess price sensitivity and the supermarkets, I guess, are competing on price as well. So you're kind of, I mean, I'm expecting to pay a premium at the farmers markets. What's your take on, I guess, the price of an average, poultry or meat or veggies versus a supermarket? Is there a slight premium?
Um, Sometimes depends again. There's always two sides here in the shopping basket. If you're shopping in the farmers market at the end of the tomato season, you're going to get really good value tomatoes. You probably can buy a box of them if you want to go home and make tomato salsa,
Mhm.
and you get them for a really good price
That's true.
because it's the end of the season. You don't get that opportunity in a supermarket. Tomatoes come as tomatoes come. Um, and so if you're shopping seasonally in a farmer's market, you can often get really good bargains at the right time. You However, some research shows that people shopping particularly for organics will spend up to 10% more for that to secure organically grown food.
Mhm.
Um, but farmers markets, if you're conscious of your shop, the amount of money you've set aside for market morning, they don't need to be more expensive than
Yeah,
supermarkets at all.
that's good to know. Maybe it's a fallacy that it's more pricey even though you're buying direct. So that's good to know that, it's
Oh, but it's
right.
just like anything in a shop, Jono. I mean, people charge, if you want to look at honey in a supermarket, you can get you know, the the home brand, supermarket
That's true.
brand honey for, $5, and you can spend $10 for the same, you know, jar of honey, but that's got I don't know, special bees from a special place.
That's true.
You'll pay a premium.
That's right. Now looking
Yeah.
ahead, what's your view on, I guess we've gone from 0 to 150 markets in a generation, and they seem to be thriving and continuing. What's your outlook
Mhm.
on the next 10, 20 years? Is it same or continuing to grow? There's still communities that haven't,
Yep.
made the move yet, I'm guessing?
Yep. Look, I wouldn't see stratospheric growth. What I would love to see is more local government engaged more purposefully in helping facilitate farmers markets in their communities because of the win-win that I was talking about. I mean, there is no downside. Um, I don't see massive closures sort of, dragging the sector down. I mean, if you talk about the northeast of New South Wales, you can't imagine that there'd be, if they've got one every day, apart from Monday already, you can't imagine that you're going to see any growth
Right.
in a region like that. But there are opportunities for new start markets. And one of the things that's happening currently, which is of note, is the West Australian government last year, leading up to their election, the Minister for Agriculture announced a $2 million grant pool to foster farmers markets
Brilliant.
in WA.
Oh, congratulations.
So, and I was there late last year running a couple of workshops, which I think at last count, as far as I'm aware, have given birth, in inverted commas, to about 10 New Start farmers markets as a
Right.
consequence.
Okay.
So there can be growth. It will be facilitated by enlightened government like that.
That's right. And the growers,
Um,
I'm guessing if the growers are screaming out saying, "Hey, why haven't we got one here? I'm prepared to drive 1 or 2 hours to a market." That's probably what
well,
yeah.
yeah, that's true.
Mm.
Although I would say the other thing that government can be helpful with, state government, I think, in this context, is we need to reach out to more primary producers because some of them are not involved in farmers markets at the moment.
Uh,
And I think another run of workshops to as a sort of come and hear all about it, a recruitment um, sort of scenario to encourage more food producers to participate in farmers markets. I think we did that, but I think it's time we can do that again. I think that's probably, you're talking about challenges in the age of primary producers. One of the other challenges is reaching out to the primary food production sector so that they understand what the benefits are and can be going forward for them. And actually underpinning and ensuring that the food chain is sustainable.
that's right.
It's really important.
That's right. Now on the lighter side, out of 150 markets, I'm going to ask you a tough question, like picking your favorite child almost. Um,
Oh,
but do you have a favorite? I won't say one, but a favorite few that tickle your fancy for some particular reason.
yes, I think so. I think I'm not allowed to have favourites, just as you've alluded. Not allowed
Or
to
a
have
soft spot,
faves.
a soft spot for.
I have a soft spot for some of those early start markets because they were brave. I mean, if you think about it, Jono, I went along and I said, "Here, look, I've got an idea. This is what you do." And in the beginning, it was really hard to get people to embrace the change and, take the leap of faith. So I think I've got to highlight the markets who took that early leap that are trading very successfully today, 20 odd years later. So Albany in WA,
Mhm.
Margaret River in WA, the Barossa Farmers Market, and the Wollonga and the Adelaide Farmers Market in South Australia. Um, I was involved in the establishment of Carriage Works in Sydney. So that's a pretty big farmers market in Redfern. And up in New South Wales, right up in the north, I was there just recently. I mean, there's some fabulous markets. The Mullumbimby one is wonderfully alternative, just as you would expect in the northern rivers. But the wonderful tropical. There's a lot of tropical produce
Mm,
when you're getting that, further up north.
that's right.
Um, so there's, I don't want to have left any of those
No, and
babies
look,
out
I'm in
in the cold,
Melbourne. Can
but
you give any a shout out in Melbourne or Victoria that are of interest?
oh, well, there are lots of farmers markets in Victoria. Abbotsford is one. I mean, they're all around. That's the interesting thing about Melbourne. Melbourne's well served in inner Melbourne, if you like. There are quite a lot of farmers markets in the suburbs in Melbourne. Kingston Farmers Market, for example, was one that my father was a regular at. He used to take a shopping trolley off to Kingston when he was alive, off to Kingston Farmers Market. And so there are lots of good markets in Melbourne, gasworks in Melbourne as well. Um, the one state where there are fewer farmers markets is Queensland, but I was it's near the New South Wales border, but Palm Beach in the Gold Coast has a big market that I was in recently.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean they've all got the thing to note is that all those markets have got their own very, very particular
Yeah,
personalities.
that's right.
Right.
Character, different communities, which is part of the fun. Now,
Yeah.
I hope that when you go and visit these, that the stall holders all know who you are and say thank you. Do you do you get
No, no.
right?
I can shop quite anonymously in many farmers markets, and I'm happy for that. It gives me a lot of pleasure to walk through a farmers market and see the dynamic of what's happening, see families shopping for fresh food, see producers with smiles on their faces, with one of my mantras to the stallholders was always pile it high, kiss it goodbye. And when you see a stall that's slightly depleted towards the end of the market and they're looking pleased with themselves, I mean that gives me a nice warm feeling.
That's great. Look, it's a remarkable impact you've had, kind of under the radar, so to speak. You know,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
happy under the radar.
yeah. Well, you should be very very proud of what you've achieved. It's beyond just it's got benefits throughout health, fresh food, community. Supporting growers and something to do for families on the Sunday. Just it kind of covers the whole segment. So it's super impressive. I even told my son, "Hey, I'm chatting with the head of the Australian Farmers Market Association." He was like, "How did you get such a super, you know, celebrity on the show?" And I said, "You're right. Like this is a serious, um, Yeah,
You better go to the market. Where's your nearest market,
yeah, well,
Jono? You better take him.
St Kilda, actually, so
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's got a lot of history, the St Kilda markets, which
Yep.
is great.
Yep.
Now, if you don't mind me asking about, cooking and food, being a foodie, what are your couple of latest, dishes that we could go down to the farmer's market, get some produce and put together?
Oh, I think at the moment, because it's wintry, I think you could make a pretty good pasta bake. So you could, this is totally off the top of my head. You could, because you can go and buy fresh pasta at the farmer's market. You can buy milk at the farmer's market, cream, dairy. You can buy tomatoes. You can buy cheese. You can buy eggplant. You can buy zucchinis. And if you wanted to make what I would call, I mean, I don't have a recipe for this exactly, but basically you're it's a vegetarian style dish, but you're layering up seasonal veggies with pasta, and whether it's lasagna sheets or it may not be, it could be other pasta. And you're making a nice sort of bechamel style sauce and layering it through, and then you're grating a nice, lump of parmesan across the top of it, and pop it in the oven
Mm,
and bake it. That could be a good sort of Saturday lunch after your farmer's market shop.
that sounds like a nice dish, and it's quite
Or you could have a
simple to
pumpkin
make.
soup,
Pumpkin soup, yeah.
good pumpkin soup from the market at the moment. Lots of pumpkins in the market.
Okay.
Um, that's one of the lovely things, because if you go to the market and you see what's there and you see what's fresh or you see what's good value, you okay, you buy it, and then you've got to think about what you're going to do. Well, that's how I cook. You then work out what you're going to make with it, rather than, I don't go to the market and say I'm going to do chicken cacciatore tonight.
Right.
I go the other way around,
Okay.
which is what's there and what will I make.
Right. Yeah, that's a good
Mm.
idea. I guess to all our listeners, cancel your Woolies orders, particularly the make an effort and go and support your local community and allocate, a bit more time and spend for fresh produce. You'll appreciate every bit of it. You've just got to make the effort, I guess. And some people just need a little gentle push, I'm guessing. So, Jane,
And
yeah,
Jono, can I just say,
yes,
when you're
mm,
there at the farmer's market, thank the farmer and the farmer's family who have worked so hard
mm,
to grow or rear the food that you're buying. Appreciate them. Let them know how much they matter.
that's very, very important, and important to teach our kids to also do the same, be grateful and say thanks. So I'm going to take that on board. That's a great thing to do, and they really do appreciate it. Um,
Yep.
but Jane, look, you're feeding the nation, and keeping.
No, I don't think so.
Well, it's a really critical sector, and keeping communities together, and it's really grown 25 years. It's a remarkable achievement. I was very excited to have you on today talking food. So like I said to all our listeners, make an effort and support, and growers, if you're looking to get up early and sell some more produce, reach out and grab yourself a stall. Jane, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks very much, John. I've really enjoyed chatting. It's been great. Thank you.